show. Today, we are turning the tables on our host, Janyre Milius, and I am Janyre Tromp. I am also an author and an editor, and Jen and I have just kind of hit it off over the last couple of months, and I found out she was releasing a book, and so I told her I was taking over her show, and she did not have an option. So here we are. I get to introduce you to your normal host. I don't know. Have you ever read your entire bio for everybody, Jen?
No.
All right, here we
Thank
go.
you for
So
asking,
this
but no.
is all new information for you guys. So Janyre is an entrepreneur, a developmental editor, coach, and accomplished multi-genre author who leverages her 20-year corporate career, undergraduate communication degree, and MBA to help creatives bring out their inner greatness so that they get comfortable using their voice, sharing their message, and being visible. Okay, I don't have an MBA. She's way smarter than me. So while in corporate, Jen ran oversight for dozens of trade shows, as well as attended hundreds of shows as a booth attendant. She partnered with senior leadership for keynote communication, whether it was developing content or guiding them on how to present that material and present themselves. Since starting her business in August of 2014, Jen has hosted over 150, y'all, 150 book signings, including booths at multi-day expos. Jen has helped hundreds of authors and creatives move to their next level, whether it was through coaching, developmental editing, refining keynote speeches, instructions through courses or workshops, or even having them here on the Tough Fish Show. She's spoken to thousands of elementary school students about courage and confidence and worked with hundreds of authors and creatives. She believes that when you share your gifts and message, you bring joy to others and show what's possible to them. Tapping into your full potential means that joy, purpose, and possibility are coming together through you. Welcome to your very own show, Jen. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad. I'm so glad you suggested we do this. Thank you so much, Janyre. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, you guys, we are here today just to kind of pick Jen's brain a little bit. She is so smart and has such great ideas, but I want you to know that she has this brilliant book coming. So, I'm going to be mentioning the name of this book to you a couple of times, but get out your pen and a piece of paper and write this book name down because you are going to want to get a copy of this book. It is the Author Stylist Guide. The Author Stylist Guide. Own your greatness, get visible, and share your message. Okay, as authors and creatives, let's just be honest here for a second. Most of us are introverts. And even those of us that aren't introverts, we can be a little awkward. Creatives are awkward. So, Jen, tell us a little bit about the book, where it's coming from, and how it can help us creatives.
I love this book. It was so much fun to write, and it's coming from a place of wanting to be like that back pocket resource, a toolkit, a toolbox, really, for the person who has said yes to the next opportunity that came up for themselves. So, as a writer, you know that writing your book, you need to get visible. And sometimes that visibility is working with an editor. And then it's hitting publish. But once you hit publish, you're not done. Once you hit publish, a whole new level opens up. And that new level means that you're now talking about that book. You're talking about the message that you had in that book or the messages that you have, so that more people get to know you, get to see your book, and that you're connecting with more people. But that can feel uncomfortable and scary. So this book is about helping you to move through that, where after you have said yes to being on a podcast, after you have said yes to doing a book signing or yes to a speaking engagement, now what? Now what do you do because you said yes? And this book came about because, all of the major events that I've done in my business, whether it was the first corporate event, the first author visit that I did, the first book signing, the first big speaking engagements that I've done, is because somebody said to me, hey, we'd love to have you. would you go do? And I said yes, and then went, oh, okay, all right, how do I do this? Well, with my background, with the event planning, with the hosting of events, with just recognition events that I've done, as well as having a project management background, I was able to use skills I already had to kind of help do this and then just grow it and refine it over time. And I wanted to make that accessible for authors who were saying, I want to do this and I just need a little support getting there.
So what might be a first step? Like I just accepted speaking at an elementary school about my book. Actually, probably I wouldn't do elementary school. So I accepted for a high school. I'm going to go in. I'm supposed to talk about something. I don't know what. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I hang up and now I'm like, now what? What would you say?
Well, the first thing is I would think you would want to, first off, make sure you're clear about the parameters for that speaking engagement. So not just understanding the day, but you want to know how long you're going to be talking. When do you need to be there from, if you're speaking at, like, let's say 10 o'clock in the auditorium, do you need to be there at 9? Do you need to be there at 9:30 because of a check-in process? Understand what all you really need to do. Make sure that you have some kind of speaking agreement in place that indicates what is expected of you, what is expected of your host, so that you both are on the same page. And I am not a lawyer. I just really appreciate having legal support in my business because you're running a business. So, in the book, actually, I list out questions of what might be things you could think about so that you know how to construct a solid agreement or a place to get started so that you can have a better conversation with a lawyer who you know, like, and trust so that you are on the same page. What I would also say is, what do you want to talk about? Why do you want to speak to this particular audience? Why is what do you want to accomplish because you were there? What do you want for that audience? So when I think of an event, I think of a before, during, and an after. The before experience is in part where you're thinking about how you can create interest, how you can create enthusiasm, create a wonderful experience for your host, and if you're engaging with your attendees ahead of time. During, obviously you're there, but what you're doing there, but the post event too, meaning what are you doing to close that up to make sure you have created a wonderful experience and that transformation for them too, especially if you're doing a speaking engagement like you were mentioning with the high school. What do you want your attendees, so your high school students and the teachers who are there, to do or to think or to believe because they were there listening to you? Is there something you'd like them to do because they were there? Maybe you want them to have a shift in their mindset. Maybe you'd like them to go write in their journal that night and write about a new experience or be open to their creativity. Maybe you want them to actually go implement something and try it. Well, those are things to think about. What do you want them to do? You might want them to buy a book. So do you make that easy for them to be able to do that? So I would think about what the before, during, and after is, the message that you want, why you want to serve this audience, why it matters to this audience. And remember, you have two individuals, two entities you're really working with. The host, who is trying to solve a problem because they brought you, and the attendees, and their goals are going to be similar but still different. Understanding both so that your presentation supports both of them.
That's brilliant. And I love the fact that it is something that is, especially our nonfiction listeners. Our nonfiction listeners, you should have heard a lot of terminology that you should be familiar with from writing your book. If you didn't notice that, I was like, oh my gosh, these are things that as a developmental editor myself, I always tell my authors to think through as they're writing their book. So it's not scary. What? Speaking isn't scary? Like planning it? I love that.
Well, and the other part of that too is that, when you are into the space, when you're on a podcast, when you're at a speaking engagement, when you're at a book signing, go in with the mindset that the host or that the attendees, they're excited to get to know you. They're excited that you're there, that you have a warm audience, a likable audience, that they're going, I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Because you're going in with the best possible attitude that you can, and you're going in with the one thing you can do something about. You can do something about how you perceive things and how you are going in. You can't control what the outcome is going to be. You can't control how people are going to engage. But if you go in with the idea of, I get to do this, I'm excited to do this, this is going to be great. I get to make these connections. I get to share my message. I get to do something I love and get to be of service, then those good things, they're going to come through and you're going to create a great experience for everyone in attendance, including you.
That's a brilliant way to look at it, because like I started out, a lot of us are a little more awkward than you are. A little less polished than you are. So do you have tips on like those nerves kind of thing? Maybe like how do I approach speaking versus writing? I don't know. Does that make sense?
I follow what you're saying though. So one of the things that I do when I know I'm going to be doing some kind of speaking engagement, for instance, whether it's an online summit, whether it's an in-person workshop or an in-person speaking engagement or a podcast, I make sure I'm doing things leading up to it that I love doing that bring me a lot of joy. So, and I make sure I have space. I am an introvert, so I very much like downtime before and after. And depending upon the type of event, depends upon how much space I need, but I honor that space. There are times when I play a playlist song and I've got a little set playlist, and like driving over, if I have to go to a physical event type of thing, I'll put this on and I'm singing at the top of my lungs and, might be dancing, like rocking a little bit in my car. And I'm sure somebody looking over is like, there must be some great music going on because you look kind of happy over there. But it puts that goodness going on. And sometimes I'll sing it in the car just because I like singing. I like, just doing something like that, but it helps to release the energy. Sometimes it's going on a walk. Sometimes it's sitting outside just for a few minutes. Sometimes it's just reminding yourself saying, I've got this. It's going to be a great experience. I'm looking forward to it. And I'm in a room of friendly people. And those kind of things help if you're nervous, what's the best thing that can happen if you do this? What is it that you're trying to do? And remember that you wrote your book because you had a story you wanted to share. You wrote your book first for you. And then when you went through and were going through the editing process and working with an editor or two or three, or your cover designer, the more you were engaging more people, the more you were sharing your message as comfortably as you could, but you were getting your message out. And then you hit publish. You have a message and a story you want to tell. And the best way that you can deliver that is through your enthusiasm and your joy for the pieces that you wrote. And if it's fiction, so you go to a speaking engagement that's all about the craft, or that's about a specific element within the craft. So maybe you're talking about world building. Maybe you're talking about building suspense. Maybe you're talking about developing amazing dialogue or characters. Maybe you're talking about running a business. And oh, by the way, what you're doing is that you have books available too. So, it's another way to look at how to create that experience in your business.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah, because I don't know if you guys have picked up on this, but I'm actually my books are novels. And so a discussion of what novelists speak about is going to look typically different than what nonfiction speak about. And so I do a lot of speaking on that whole how to write a book kind of thing, but I'm a
Mhm.
historical novelist too. So I've also gone in and talked about the history behind what I've written. And so one of the books, this one always blows people away. One of the books that I wrote, one of the historical nuggets is that the Japanese bombed Michigan in World War II. And everybody's like, what? And there's this whole program that the Japanese had. And so I've actually spoken about that before. And it's a way to use just the research that I've done
Mhm.
and in a whole different realm going in and talking about it. But along with that comes, I get a lot of really weird requests. Uh, you know what I mean? Or I just don't have a lot of time. So I get a lot of people asking me to do free events. And for me, I'm a people pleaser. So it's really hard for me to decide like which ones should I say yes to and which ones shouldn't? Like, is there a framework for how we go about deciding what is worth it and what isn't?
That's a really great question because you're right that just because it's free doesn't necessarily mean that it's something to say no to. For instance, there might be a way that you negotiate how your books come into play. When you see your books as an extension of your business, that helps you to kind of think a little broader. So for instance, it might be, I'm coming to speak at this speaking engagement, but part of the payment is that I'm able to sell the books, or the host has said, I will buy so many books to give one per attendee. So you might not have been paid the honorarium, but you were paid because the books were sold. But there's something in there that is helping you. Maybe you've done the free event because they're putting you in front of the right audience for you. And it's about you getting to know them a little bit more and creating that relationship. And then what happens is that you planted seeds in that free event, in any event, really, even if it's a paid event, it's still you're planting seeds. And then it's about that post-event experience where how are you nurturing that? How are you keeping your expectations of the outcome in check, but also what can you possibly do to help nurture it on the other side of things? Because you don't know, somebody might have heard you at this free event and then 2 months later reach out to you and say, hey, would you come and speak at this? Or would you be able to, can I buy so many of your books to do this? You don't know where that will go and you don't know what will happen because of it. But the fact that you were there helps. Now, can you do every free event? No. Do you want to do every free event? No. I recommend where you're figuring out where you are and like what season of life and what season in that business phrase are you in? So are you in a space where it feels like several of these would really be instrumental because it will do X and Y, and I'm very clear what X and Y are, and I'm good with that. Then go for it. If it feels like I don't have the bandwidth for this right now, I need to be much more selective, then again, when you're clear about what will this event yield, why do you want to do this, how can you make it work for you in the best way possible, that's also an indicator. And my favorite indicator is that little inner knowing, that little inner spirit, that little inner gut feeling that says, oh, I'm so excited. This would be really cool. And it's not a feeling of, oh, I panicked, I have to do this. It's more of that inner knowing, that peaceful excitement that's like, hey, this would be really great. You know, this is a cool idea. Let's go do this. Even if you don't know all the steps, even if you don't know how it's all going to pan out, even if you have no idea, except for the fact that you got that first initial intuitive hit that said, this is the right thing. You can do this. If you get that jarring, no, this isn't the right feeling, or this isn't the right time, that's okay. Just because it's not the right time now doesn't mean it won't be the right time later. It could be, and not at all, but at least going within and trusting that little inner voice is so key, just like you did when you were writing your book. You use that little voice to help you to get that book on the page. So keep trusting that little voice.
I love that we keep making ties back to our writing because I think we're all way more comfortable with a pen or a keyboard than we are necessarily with a microphone in front of us. And I do a lot of speaking, and I can agree with what Jen said. There's a difference between like nervousness and dread. Like
Mhm.
if I think about a speaking engagement and there's like this sense of dread, then I say no.
Mhm.
If there's nervousness, like I'm gonna puke beforehand because I'm really nervous about doing something, that's a different thing. Because I do right before an event, every single time I get like this, I don't know, I'm nervous. I'm very good at speaking, but it makes me nervous. So
So,
like for example, I actually volunteered. I told Jen I was going to do this to her. And then I walked away and I was like, "Oh, shoot. I have never hosted a podcast before. I have no idea what I'm doing." And I'll be honest, I had that fluttering, I'm going to puke, before Jen and I got on. But the fact of the matter is I was excited. I love that you talked about excitement because as creatives, that's kind of where we get our energy from. And I think the whole perspective that you're talking about, a perspective change from being afraid of something to finding the joy in it. I think that's such an important conversation to have. And I love the title of your book,
Thank you.
The Author Stylist Guide, because
Yes.
it's like there's a stylist about it. There's a sense of moving into and claiming this power, if you will, for your message. And I love that perspective. And I'm just
Thank
kind of
you.
a little curious how the title came about.
Because, well, first off, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. The author stylist guide came about because I have a service author stylist. And the service and the book came about because I, as probably so many other writers, like to make up things, including I make up words. And so why not? And I've always liked, for instance, like as it relates to clothes, my favorite boutique, I will go to my person there and say, this is what I'm trying to do. Or I can just text an outfit or an item and he'll tell me yes or no. And I love that candor, but his goal is for me to feel amazing in what I'm doing and feel put together. Well, that's what this is too. And, you know, and yes, that's a clothing piece, but you style your home when you host a party. You're setting up that space so that it feels a certain way to create the energy, the type of event you want to have. So you're doing all of those types of things anyway. Well, and I think every person has their own style, has their own mark that they want to make. And when you're really tapping into that, when you're really tapping into your own joy, your own gifts, and your personality, because I believe there's only one you. I believe that we're infinitely and wonderfully made. So, like each one of us has our own little, thing to let our light shine. Well, you do that when you feel like you have that support. So it was a creative entrepreneur, that's me, helping other creatives to do that, to let their light shine, own their greatness, and get their message out. And it started off with this service, and then this book, was created because I wanted to make this a little bit more accessible, and I wanted it to feel like I had a resource that I could use right then too. So, and then if more support was needed or more personalized support, then there's the service available. But the idea came because I think that it's just fun and it also feels like you're really creative. You're creating something special. You're being intentional and you're being deliberate with what you're doing versus just kind of just slapping something together. That's not what we do with our books. We put our books together with some intentionality. There's a reason you chose the cover. There's a reason that you chose to build the world a certain way or develop characters a certain way. Even if your characters are speaking to you, you still are trying to guide them. There's a reason you constructed your book for fiction, for nonfiction, a certain way to help your reader. Well, there's that intentionality that you've put into your book. So put that into your business and into yourself when you're presenting that.
So I feel like for me, and maybe for others out there, there's a kind of a disconnect though between like, okay, who am I really? Like, does anybody really care to hear about like my perspective, like who I am? So let's talk a little bit about the importance and how, maybe the how piece of it, how to figure out who you are in a message for a particular speaking engagement or a book signing or that type of a thing. How do we do that? How do we put it together?
Well, first off, when I think about you taking that step, it really is sometimes we first off need to make sure we're clear about our own expectation. So how big is this event? Well, it's big to you. This step, it might feel like, hey, I'm doing this at my local bookstore at this event for a local bookstore for 2 hours versus a multi-day trade expo. Those are two scaled events. Those are two different types of events that require similar skill sets, but different levels. So one might be big to one person and one might be big to another person. It doesn't matter. Understanding your own expectation. But then, you know, I think the place to really start is understanding what you perceive your role to be. Are you an encourager? Are you a guide? Are you a leader? Are you leading your readers? Are you guiding your readers? Are you encouraging your readers? Are you, kind of like the surrogate uncle or aunt kind of thing to go, hey, come over here. Let's have this conversation. Let's have this chat. So when you kind of know your role, and when you decide what that role is, which might be different in different situations. When I've done school visits, it's more of I'm here, I believe in you, I'm excited for you. And yes, there's an encourager, but I also want it to feel relatable, that it's really important that those elementary children understand that it's a relatable type of thing, that it's okay to ask me a question type of thing. So I might dress, for instance, like dress slacks and a nice top or a nice sweater combination kind of thing and keep it to that. But I still look professional. I still look put together. It's like a business casual. But when I went to the corporate speaking engagement, that elevated it completely. It was a different look. It was a different expectation. So yes, I was a guide, but I was also leading in that group. So it required something a little different. And I was clear about what I wanted in that group and what was needed from me from the host. So the host is also going to help set the tone. When you're going to a school visit, if you're going to a high school visit, it's similar in that way because you're going to want it to feel probably a little bit more business casual, that you're put together, you're a lead, you have credibility, but you're guiding a certain way. But
Right.
if you were going to do summit speaking, you were showing a different type of street cred. So you're going to present yourself a little differently. I hope that answers the question.
It absolutely does. And what you're saying is just because you make an appearance or talk a little bit differently, speak a little bit differently for different audiences, doesn't change the core element of who you are.
Right.
Which I love that idea of we can shift a little bit based on our target audience. And you and I have talked a lot at length about target audience because it's so important to everything writers do from the very, very, very beginning all the way through to marketing and everything in between, the writing, the editing, presentation on platforms, social media. And I just love that it's such a cohesive conversation. But you're right, just like I have different conversations on Instagram that I do on whether it's called Twitter or X, I don't know what to call it. X, the social media formerly known as Twitter, uh, whatever. But the conversations I have in both of those places are different, just like the conversations that you're going to have between a high school audience and a corporate audience are
Yep.
different. And I love that we can do both and still be true to who we are. And I tend to be a very casual, laid back presenter, whether I'm in a high school
Mhm.
or a corporate setting. And that happens to work for me because that's who I am.
Mhm.
I'm just a very laid back, kind of goofy. I embrace the whole nerd part of who I am in whatever setting that I am. In my household, we say that weird is a compliment. So
But it
you
is.
it it
But
is.
to me, that's you being true. So when you are clear about
Mhm.
what you want to convey and who you are, that message that you want to have come through, that feeling is going to it's authenticity. It's coming through and you'll feel that. And that comes through in how you're showing up with whatever audience it is. I know that when I'm going and talking to children about, you know, why, like how Einstein and Moo came to be in their books and how I see them as like owning their little spaces and sharing their greatness. That's the same message that I will share within actually this book, within my co-authored leadership book, and when I do speaking engagements for adults. But I adjust it differently because I want to meet the audience where they are. A 6-year-old is not going to have the same conversation with me as a 30-year-old or as a 45-year-old. So I would rather reach that person where they are and
Mhm.
honor what that is and trust I'm planting the right seeds and essentially detaching from that outcome, but just continuing to show up as me and owning that space and being intentional and conscientious with that.
I love, the conversation too that you just mentioned it again, detaching yourself from the outcome. And that's something else that I talk to people about too, is control what you control what you can control.
Mm.
And so in this type of scenario, what might be some good goals to set? Because I think we set ourselves up for failure by setting the wrong goals so often.
So I think it really is depending upon the type of event we're talking about. But
Mhm,
if you have a book signing, what can you control? You can control how your table looks. You can control how prepared you are. You can control your attitude, your energy going in. You can do your part to be in the best space you possibly can. When you're there, you're you're there early enough that you can be set up, that you have plenty of time to be set up, plenty of time so you're not rushed. You like the way it looks. You like it from the way you can work with it from behind. You like it if somebody approaching your space, you really feel good about it. And while you're there, you're happy, you're enjoying it, you're excited, you're not on your phone because I've shown this so many times in different engagements where, you know, how would you feel if you have see somebody, and I'm going to example the, so if I'm at my table, even if I'm doing a social media post, do you want to approach me?
no,
Didn't
what?
think so. Don't
No.
do it.
Yeah.
Don't be
No.
on the phone unless you have to. If you need it to do, hey, I'm still here, or look at this, or you're doing a video ahead of time, great. Or if you use it obviously to make transactions, totally understand. But don't read or do something else because nobody wants to approach you. So do your best to do everything you can to be in the best headspace possible. The outcomes, in my opinion, in that space are, how did I do? How did I do with those things I could control? If I've had events before where I've done all the things like that, and then nobody's come, or maybe one person came. Well, the one person who came, thank you. I'm glad you did because I was really glad. No one came, thank you. Because what that told me was, okay, was it the location?
Mhm,
Was it the time frame? Was it great idea, but not great in like the execution per se? Meaning, I've gone to a book signing where I arranged it. I thought it was going to be a great opportunity. I thought it was going to have a good time frame for foot traffic, for instance, and no one came. And you know, that's okay. The best thing I could do was to say, hey, I showed up. I'm
mhm.
glad I'm here. I got a chance to learn. I thanked the host for having me. And then now on the back end, it's deciding, okay, do I try again, just a different location, a different time? Or is it a no, that I realized that it really just wasn't the right space for me, like I had initially thought? That's okay because you've gotten more information. And the more information you have, the better you're able to make decisions moving forward. And that's really kind of how I think you can control that with your, like a speaking engagement. Have you gone in? Have you prepared, especially if you're delivering a workshop or a conference speaking or corporate speaking engagement? Have you practiced? Have you practiced your cadence? Have you practiced your intonation? Have you practiced the content? Do you know the timing of it? Have you practiced your tech? Do you feel really confident with the material and really understanding what you're trying to impart? Those are things you can do something about. When you're there, talk to people, have a great conversation and get to know them because you know what? They're there probably because in part you're there, but you're both are there for similar reasons. So find out what that is and get to know them. You're talking with people, and those people, they are interested in what you want to do, what you have to say. And you're probably interested in what they have to say too. You might even glean something that can come up in your speaking engagement that you might be able to use because it made sense in that time. So those are things you can control, but the best thing you can do when it's to detach from that outcome is, can you look yourself in the mirror at the end of that event and say, I've done everything I possibly could to make it the best for myself and for the people who were there. Can you say yes? If you can say yes, that's awesome. If you said, I think there were some things I could improve. Next question is, are you being a little too hard on yourself? Or if it's true that, okay, so there might have been some opportunity for improvement. What was it? Okay, so what can you do a little differently so you learn and apply it to the next event and you keep getting up and you keep going? To me, I think that sometimes we put the expectation like, I'm going to sell hundreds of books at this event, or I'm going to have so many people sign up for my email list, or what happens if all, 1,000 people who attend, you know, reach out. Isn't that a cool problem to have?
Mhm.
So how might you solve that? So that if that helps you to think about, well, what happens if 1,000 people all take me up on an offer I put out? Okay, great. Okay. Are all 1,000 people doing it at the same time? Or how might you scale that so you know how to manage it? And those are some things to kind of think through, like, what's the worst that you think could happen? Is it really the worst? Or is it
Mm.
just a little scarier because it's, oh, I didn't, if I sell, 100 books at this event, that would be awesome. That's a lot of books to bring into this event. Yeah. So what happens if I sell out of this title and I'm midway through this event? Okay, what happens? What will you do? Do you want to say, I will go ahead and collect payment and then offer an invoice and say, I will ship it to you as soon as you get back or as soon as you have a print order? Do you want to collect it on an email wait list? What do you want to do? What would help you to feel more successful? Thinking through those pieces will help you to detach a little bit better because you've done the best you can to handle what you can control, what you know, and trusting that the right things are going to happen. And if I'm a big believer that if the door closes or if it doesn't work out, then it's redirecting you to where you want to go. So fall forward quickly and gracefully as you possibly can. I've joked about this before on the show that when my co-author and I wrote, it's a verb, and we were pitching it, I mean, the first few times we pitched and we were coming back with no's, I was disappointed. I was hurt. And then I changed my thinking by finding some humor and recognizing that Another One Bites the Dust by Queen was helping me. So I would play that and I'm like, okay, now I feel better. And I would sing the song to my co-author. He was probably like, really, Jen? I don't I don't need this every time. I'm like, yeah, but right now I need to do this. So I'm going to figure out a way. Because it made me laugh and it helped me to detach from it and be okay with it. And I look at that and say, thank you for letting me know. And thank you for letting me know quickly so I can redirect. And when you look at it as an experiment, it kind of helps. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. I love thinking of things in terms of an experiment. And that actually, like, as you were talking, I was thinking that's a lot of details to keep track of too. Because you're talking about like, did this work? Did that work? And I'm like, I don't know. 6 months from now, I don't remember. And and now I'm thinking I should have something in place so that I can remember these things. And I think you have a whole chapter about keeping everything straight, right? Do I remember
I
that?
do. Yes, I have a
Um,
chapter about inventory management that it blends inventory management and it blends project management
okay.
because especially if you have multiple events going on at the same time, but they're not at the same places. Like you might have one speaking engagement where you're just getting started on working out the agreement, and then you might have another one where you have things at the printer that you need to have, and then another one that you're going to be delivering in 2 weeks that you really are practicing a lot more. Those are different parts to come up with. And what I recommend is creating a template of what are the steps that you actually have and using a tool. I use Asana. You can use Trello, or there are so many different tools, but using something like that and I build out a template, I make a copy and I start working that and put all the dates that I possibly can. And when I don't know what the step is quite yet, or really what the next thing is, even though I know the items, but I might not be abundantly clear of when, I have a repeating item called set up next steps that shows up almost every week at a certain time, because sometimes it's like, go look at this project, go look at everything here. Do you need to start bringing some other stuff up? Because you haven't done something with it. And it helps me to kind of, especially when I have a bigger project that I'm managing to kind of work through, it helps me to stay on track with it when they're all at different places. So that is something that, and I use Excel files for this similar reason. So I'll use different pieces, but having a section for notes saying, hey, this is how this event went. This is what worked. And then if it's something where you realized, hey, this opportunity at this book signing, I didn't bring enough books. What I might do is go back over to the checklist that I use to get prepared for the next one and say, hey, next time, events that look like this bring this many books. Events that look like potentially this kind of event bring this many books, or scaling it. How to scale the books is how I might write notes to myself based upon what I've seen.
I think that's absolutely brilliant. I think that's
Thanks.
really, really brilliant. And it occurs to me right now that there might be people out there listening that are in like total panic mode over the idea of having a project that big. And let me stop just here a second, because I was thinking, I was picturing you like doing the corporate events that you did with all of the work that goes into trade shows. And I actually ran booths in my past too. And so neither of us are particularly worried about this because we're used to it. But here's the thing, not everybody is going to be used to it.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
That is 100% okay. One of the parts that Jen and I were talking about before we popped on is scaling and knowing it's okay to not start at a super high level. And what is your advice, Jen, then about like how do we do that? Like how do we deal with, and some of it is in what we talked about, like which ones to say yes to and which ones to say no to. But how do we get to this? How do we figure that out for ourselves?
So when I think about those first things, like when I first got started with my business and putting myself out there, the very first book signing was at this nice little chocolate place that a friend of mine who was a fellow author had suggested, hey, go there. And they were a fellow business owner. And it was for a few hours, just a couple of hours. And it was my first book. So I had as many books as I could possibly bring, type of thing. And it was just such a cool experience. And then I was like, well, I want to do more of these. And I wanted to do more of what I had just done, meaning something similar, a different type of foodie place. I'm a little foodie. And I also think books and chocolate, books and tea, books and cakes, pastries all work very, very well together. So I would look at places like that and approach them and say, this is what I'd like to do. Would you be open to that? Here's a copy of my book so you could see it and find out what that looked like. But I just started just following that natural curiosity and saying, okay, this is what I want to do. But then when I saw an opportunity for a pet expo and my children's books were based upon our two kitties, I was like, that seems to be a cool opportunity. I wonder if they would be open. So I saw the application, put my name in the hat and said, if this is something that my products would fit what you're doing, I'd love an opportunity to be there. And they wrote back, said, yes. And would you do some stage time? And I went, sure. Okay. Now what do I do? So I said yes. And then thought, well, you know, I think I want to use a modified version of what I do at school visits. So I just took that and modified it a little bit and made sure that the tech that they had or what I needed to make sure it would all work together and adjusted from there. So in fact, the very first speaking engagement, I had one idea, but then my illustrator surprised me. And because she was there when I was going to be on stage, I had her come on stage with me. And then we just talked about what it was like because I wanted our audience to understand that it took a team, that you might see the writer's book name on the book, but it took, in my case, because it was a picture book, it took an illustrator or a graphic designer, and she also did my formatting, but it took so many other pieces and people to help get that book to where it was that when she surprised me, I looked at that and said, well, how can I surprise and delight this audience too? and shine some goodness on someone who was helping me. And she graciously, you know, got on the stage with me. And it was really cool because was it what I had prepared to talk about? No, but it was the right thing. It felt really good. And it felt even better than what I could have done. So I went with that flow. It was one of my first experiences, and it was a very casual kind of stage experience. It wasn't everybody sitting in front of you because it was at an expo. So people were moving in and out. If they sat there, they did. If they didn't, but you were talking on the microphone. That was pretty much it. But there were still positive things that came from it. And so, but like I said at the beginning, the real big ones came because somebody said to me, hey, would you come and do this? And I said yes. And I also realized that when those were happening, they were becoming a little bigger than what I had done before. And that was okay.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that they kind of naturally scale a little bit. It's really
Mhm.
rare for somebody to come and ask somebody who's not had any experience speaking to do a big, huge expo. So don't panic. If somebody is asking you to do an expo, they've seen something in you that makes
Yes.
them think that you're capable of doing it. Because that's uh,
Yes.
event planners are not gonna ask somebody that's totally green to do something that's massive like that. That would be a bizarre thing for an event planner to do, I would think. But, go ahead.
I was going to say, but to your point, what you just said about that person seeing something in you, if it might be that it's hard for you to see in you the gifts that you have. But when somebody else takes the mirror and says, hey, look at this goodness, look at this greatness that you have, look at these gifts that you have already started sharing, or that you can do this, you know, trust that. If you have that, going back to that little knowing on the inside, if it comes to that feeling of, ooh, I can do this. I can do this. Even if you feel like you could talk yourself out of it, then find somebody who might help you to keep it moving. Find somebody who, whether it's a coach, whether it's, your editor, whether it's a friend, somebody who can say, hey, I see this in you. They wouldn't have asked. You can do this. I believe in you. How can I help you? That matters. That will help you to feel comfortable, and who will cheerlead with you, and who will encourage you, and who can't wait to hear how it went and celebrate your win with you. Because even if you feel like, oh, that could have gone so much better, or that wasn't as great as I had wanted, you know what? You did it. You showed up, you owned your space, and you did it. Celebrate that and then try it again.
I love that, and I see that throughout the book that you put together, and I just love how you are that encourager, both in
Thank
what
you.
you do as a coach, but then also what is showing up in your book. And you guys, if you have not already gone and bought yourself a copy, go do that right now. The Author Stylist Guide. Own your greatness, get visible, and share your message. Jen, thank you so much for letting me take over your show and talking a little bit about how us as authors can kind of style ourselves inside these opportunities that are coming at us and how to take best advantage of them. It has been an absolute joy hanging out with you guys, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you so much for doing this with me and for putting me on the hot seat, Janyre. I so appreciate you.
Absolutely.